So welcome into a new adventure, I guess. This is a new thing we're going to try doing. It's going to be in the balcony with Neechie and PeePaw. We're going to, when we do one of these, we're going to each select a movie, and it's a movie that we have some affection for or some feelings for or whatever. And we're going to discuss it. And we're going to talk about why we like it and why we recommend, if you haven't seen it, to go and watch it, or possibly even rewatch it if you've seen it and maybe it's been a while. So, with that being said, Neechie, how you doing today?
I'm doing splendid. I'm excited to talk about these movies.
Okay, so for the movies today that we're going to be discussing, I have selected uh, Primal Fear, which is a 1996 movie starring Richard Gere and Edward Norton. And Nietzsche has selected Stand By Me, which is a 1986 film based upon a book by Stephen King starring Wil Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Jerry O'Connor, Kiefer Sutherland, just to name a few. The movie was just riddled with up and coming actors from that branch or a batch of young stars. So anyway, but we're going to start off with Primal Fear. Now, this is a drama. It is a based upon the character Martin Vale, played by Richard Gere, who was originally a prosecuting attorney in the city of Chicago, and he left being a being a prosecuting attorney, and he's now a defense attorney. And that's where the movie picks up is where he is he's actually a defense attorney, and he gets dragged into, or not dragged into, selects. There's a murder. There's a murder of a bishop, archbishop there in Chicago, and the character Aaron, played by Edward Norton, is suspected of the murder of the bishop. Anyway, so you, since this was my selection, and I have a lot of things, you'd never saw this movie before, right, Nietzsche?
No, I had no idea it existed.
Okay, so we rewatched this last night. So what were your thoughts about the movie?
So, as you know, I took like a bunch of notes. So, I'm just going to give like general thoughts and then wait until maybe you hit on some of the points to bring them up specifically. But like
Okay.
overall, I think, it like having Edward Norton. Okay, wait, first of all, what are we going to consider spoilers? Like, any details are we going to consider spoilers, or just like the ending of the movie is the spoiler?
I think for me, the ending of the movie was the spoiler, right? I
Okay.
mean, because I think we could say Edward Norton plays a character named Aaron. And when we meet and when we're introduced to this character in this movie, he comes across, I would say, as kind of a person of he's very shy, kind of an introvert, awkward, maybe a limited. Would you say limited education? He's not like he's not necessarily like uh
He has to
challenged.
ask what things mean a lot, right? So, like,
Yeah,
he'll be, like, asked a question, and he'll be like, "Wait, what do you I don't know what that
yeah,
means."
yeah. So I don't think he's the character doesn't, to me, doesn't come across as, say, as somebody like with we'll say mentally handicapped. But what I'll say is he's not very well educated. He's of low education, like say a dropout from school. Like
Like a
he didn't go.
farmhand that you would have,
Yeah,
like, back in the day.
yeah, he doesn't. He's not very well educated. I don't believe he finished high school even. I think he dropped out of school. He's a runaway. Um, in the story, we learned that he ran away to Chicago from what was it Kentucky? I think it was
somewhere southern, because he has the accent, right?
Yes, he's playing. He's using a southern accent. I think he ran away to Chicago like when he was around 16 years of age, somewhere in there. So he didn't finish school. He was living on the streets. He is taken in. The archbishop sees him, has compassion on him, takes him in, and he's in a like a, I guess a house for wayward children, we'll say. Well, and
run by the church specifically, though.
Correct, right? ran by the Catholic Church, correct. And he is in the opening scenes of the movie. You see Aaron is in the boys' choir, the Catholic boys' choir, and they're singing at this big event that is there to pay homage to the Archbishop and some of the other higher dignitaries within the city of Chicago. And then the next thing we see is this, and you don't really see a whole lot of it. You just see a scene where a knife comes crashing down, and for those that are a little bit squeamish, I'm a little bit heads up here. A knife comes crashing down and severs several of the fingers on the one of the hands of the Archbishop.
Can we pause on that for a second?
Yes.
Because that was like a moment for me, like when we were watching, like you saw, I was like, wait, what just happened there? Because there's so much happening at the beginning that I will say upon first watch, right? When you know nothing, like you came in like myself, right? Knowing, some of these actors, but knowing like none of really what this movie was. I kind of even forgot what you told me the plot was. I was trying to keep up with like, okay, there's this person and there's that person, there's this happening. And like all of it's very interesting, but not knowing like who or what we're following. And then that hand chop scene happens. And I was like, wait, what? I had like no idea. Like, did he chop off his own hand? Like, it's kind of unclear the way that it's shot. Like, what the fuck is happening? Like, you don't know. Like, so much has happened, and then all of a sudden there's this hand chop. The music in it is really good too, and it reprises at some points, I believe, if I remember correctly, which is really cool. That scene was wild.
Yeah. And I would say there's a certain stereotype about Chicago, right? And about the politics and the inner workings of Chicago, how it's always been kind of a little bit on the, even going back to the days of Capone, and Prohibition and stuff, about there being like corruption within the government. And that's where this movie quickly turns to. There's corruption within the government. And so the whole thing is the premise around the character Aaron, played by Edward Norton, is accused because he's running from the home of the archdiocese, and he's covered in blood. The police capture him. Martin, played by Richard Gere, sees all this playing out on the television, and makes some calls to get access to Aaron so that he can, what would you call? Secure him as a client, and he takes the case pro bono because this is one of those cases that is going to get a lot of airtime on television and news reports and things like that. So this is something that would elevate him as a attorney if he can properly execute and defend Aaron against this murder, right? So it increases his value. So the prosecuting attorney in this case was a protege of Richard Gere, played by Laura Linney. And there is some there's a line in there I thought was kind of funny because he tries to rekindle a romance with her, and yeah, and she makes a statement. No, it was a one night stand that lasted 6 months. So, I thought that was kind of a funny little statement there that, they had this quote one night stand that lasted 6 months rather than classifying it as a relationship, Um,
Their scene together, which happens like if I did my notes correctly, like before the whole hand chop scene,
yeah,
their whole scene together was so odd to me at first because I was like, is this supposed to be like hot? Like this whole like him coming up
yeah,
behind her and the like,
yeah,
will you dance with me type
yeah.
thing, which I want to touch on as like a line in the movie and in like what I deem to be its like significance ultimately. But like it just at the beginning when I didn't understand that piece, the will you dance with me part,
Mhm.
I was like, what the fuck, bro? Like
Yeah.
is this supposed to be like
It's
sexy?
it's a little bit creepy, right? I mean, because we
Yeah.
don't we don't when we're first introduced to these and that history, that is our introduction that they had a history, right? And it comes off as the way they do it. It came off very creepy, but again, not to make excuses, but this was like I said, this movie was made in 1996,
Oh
and
yeah, no, for sure. And
things
Richard Gere was like kind of like a hot, like my
he
mom
was
thinks Richard Gere is hot.
yeah, he was a sex symbol back then, and so um but the whole him coming up behind her and kind of talking we'll say suggestively to her.
Seductively,
S-
yeah.
well, I guess seductively,
In his
suggestively,
mind.
yeah, whatever, is a reoccurring thing all throughout this movie. Even when they were because she ultimately is assigned the prosecution of Aaron, and so there's that whole thing where they're kind of um, but anyway, as the movie goes on, Aaron um, continuously proclaims his innocence, and there is like any kind of murder mystery. There's little hints. There's little clues that are sprinkled throughout the movie about things. Richard Gere believes that. Because the character Aaron keeps talking about how he has these blackout moments and things, and so he calls in a psychologist to meet and talk with Aaron, and the psychiatrist's name was Molly, played by Frances McDormand.
Love
Um,
her.
yeah, she did a really good job. She in the process of interviewing Aaron. There's a scene where she's wanting to talk about Aaron's girlfriend. Um, and the because she records all these interviews with him, and the battery is starting to die on her camera, so it's chirping. So it's almost it almost sounds like one of those smoke detector alarms that chirps, right? And so it's kind of an annoying type thing, and we see a glimpse of somebody else appear besides Aaron, because Aaron's kind of a lovable, innocent looking guy. He kind of looks like I think they use the term in the movie like a Boy Scout, right?
Mhm.
And we see a glimpse of somebody who's not a Boy Scout. Um, and we see,
Still Edward Norton, we should clarify, like, they don't actually
yes,
use another person,
no,
but
no,
it's that
yeah,
idea of, like, a different identity,
yes,
multiple personality, dissociative identity, that type
yes,
of yes.
exactly. Um, and because the entire time Aaron keeps telling uh, Richard Gere that there was another person, a third person in the room. And so when the psychiatrist Molly is interviewing Aaron and kind of impressing him a little bit, we see a little bit of a glimpse of this. But then, as quickly as that personality surfaces, it quickly dissipates again, right? and he just starts talking about how he has a bad headache. There is some things that come out. There is a Richard Gere. Martin, he has a colleague that is a former Chicago police officer who is now his, I guess, investigator, played by Andre Brower. Anyway, so he goes to Edward to Aaron's apartment and has a run-in with a buddy of Aaron's, and they get into a struggle.
Another altar boy.
Another altar boy, and he winds up in the struggle. He snatches the earring out of his ear, and so anyway, Richard questions Aaron about the earring, and he says, "Oh, that was what was that guy's name?
Which
Alex.
one?
Alex
Oh, yes.
was his roommate's name, Alex, or not roommate, but friend." And so they finally track down him, and they have a big chase through the underbelly of streets there of Chicago, but they finally pin him, and Alex tells them about what was really going on, and it's revealed that the Archbishop would bring in Alex and Aaron and the girlfriend, who we never see. We never see her in the movie, other than there's a brief little snip where there's a I don't want to get out of order, but anyway, so Alex tells them that the bishop would bring them into his office or his whatever, and he would give them about a 10 or 15-minute sermon, and then he would make them have sex.
Which odd sequence of events there. It's interesting.
Yes. And he said the preacher called it purging the devil. And so when they get this information, Martin goes back into the Archbishop's house, and he finds a tape labeled purging the devil in the his library of videotapes. And he swaps out the videotape, and he takes it back to his office, and they watch it. And sure enough, there comes up on the screen Alex and Aaron and the girlfriend, and they start having intercourse in different ways and stuff, all under the direction of the Archbishop. So now, this incenses Richard Gere's character. Goes and he confronts Aaron in the there in prison or in jail where he's being held, and he gets very confrontational with his client. And this is where we see a full manifestation of the other personality. And his was Roy.
Yes, Roy.
And Roy. What we come to learn in the movie is that because when Aaron was a youngster, his father was very abusive to him, and so his personality split. And Roy is this character. He doesn't have a stutter. He is very confrontational, hostile even. He is a protector of Aaron, and he doesn't really have a high opinion of Aaron. He calls him a little weak. He just has a lot of disparaging words that he refers to.
Basically calls him like a pussy, but like in a different word. I don't know what
terminology. Yeah. Basically he was calling him like a weakling, a very, a helpless, just, he's just,
incapable of handling the realities of life.
Yes. He just really, really runs him down quite proficiently. and he actually beats his attorney, Richard Gere. He beats Richard Gere up. Anyway, so now the problem arises because the attorney, or the rather not the attorney, but the therapist, right?
Oh, therapist, yes.
She starts explaining to Richard, or Martin, that he suffers from the split personality disorder, and he starts explaining everything to him. And now Martin is kind of screwed because he cannot change his defense in mid trial. He cannot now say, "Oh, I want to declare him insane." Right? He can't go with a mental defect as a defense, because he's already started down the that he didn't do it. So now they try to figure out what to do. And so now he's got how does he defend this guy who obviously murdered the archbishop, but he didn't, right? Because Aaron, who's the one who's being charged, the character, or the personality that people see and interact with in day to day, right? He didn't kill Archbishop, right? Roy did, which was the other personality.
But she also claims to have like no memory of it either, right? It's not even like what they would
Yeah.
call like that alter. There's what they call like an amnesic barrier, right? And like in actual science, there's that amnesic barrier that he's claiming to have between alters, where one does not recall the events of the other when they take over.
Correct. There is no. Yeah, when Roy is in charge, Aaron has no recollection. He just
doesn't even know Roy exists.
Yeah, he goes into a dark. He talks about it just goes dark. He loses time. However, Roy knows everything all the time.
Yes.
Right. Because he asked, Martin asked him, "Well, where's Aaron?" He's in a corner crying, sniveling like a little baby. Right. So Roy is aware of Aaron and knows everything about and what goes on with Aaron. Right.
He's watching.
He watches always, and he comes out when it gets too much for Aaron. And he comes out and he does the things that Aaron can't do to defend himself or protect himself. So anyway, so now Martin is kind of in a pickle because he cannot switch defenses. And so anyway, he does some lawyering. Lawyering, is that a word? He does some things as a lawyer to get things into evidence and what have you. Because I want to kind of speed things up just a smidge here. But he knows that if he goes, so eventually Aaron gets on the stand to testify. And he goes pretty soft on him. He says a few things to him under his breath to where Aaron can hear, but nobody else can, to kind of start triggering him a little bit. But he goes pretty softballs him pretty easily. And then he turns him over to the prosecuting attorney, knowing that she will go at him, right? As she has to, because she has to try to get him to confess. Because even though he had the archbishop's blood on him, and even though he had the fingerprints of the murder weapon was, Aaron's fingerprints, they don't have a motive. They can't figure out why there was, and so the tape gets brought in, and so Martin does some shenanigans and gets them to introduce the tape. And anyway, so she starts going after Aaron, and all of a sudden Aaron disappears and Roy comes forward and he attacks the prosecuting attorney. and tries to basically snap her neck. They're able to, stop whatever now. And they go into the closed chambers with the judge, and they hammer out a deal to where he's going to be put into a mental institution and what have you, because it's obvious now that they've all seen Roy versus Aaron, right? Now, before we go into this next part, this is kind of some spoilers. If you don't want to know the spoilers in the ending of the movie, I'm going to have timestamps, and you skip this part, go watch the movie, so let me ask you a question before we get into the spoilers, Neechie. Would you, on a scale of, say, was this a thumbs up or a thumbs down for you on a movie? And would you recommend people watch it?
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend people watch it, especially if you are into movies with, like that kind of courtroom or drama or crime, kind of crime thrillery type movies. If you like any of the actors, especially Ed Norton, Frances McDormand, if you like them, I think they really shine. So yeah, I would absolutely say if you're into any of that stuff, definitely would recommend that for sure.
I would recommend this as well. A lot of times with movies, I unfortunately, especially like even if it's dramas or whatever like this, when you get about a quarter to halfway through the movie, you say, "Okay, I see where this is going. I know what's going to happen," and so you kind of figure it out, and you know what's going to happen in the end. And I hate that, right? Because movies are so just telegraphed these days. There's not a whole lot of I feel like there's not a whole lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? Effort put into to keep the audience in the dark, as it were, right? I feel like way too many times they just telegraph everything ahead of time. This movie didn't do that for me. This movie, when the ending came out, when I've seen the final, scenes of the movie, I was just like, holy crap. I was totally blown away. So I highly, highly recommend if you want a movie that's going to challenge your intellect, this is the movie to do so. And on that note, this is where the spoilers come in. So if you don't want to know the spoilers, you don't want to know the end of the movie, skip to the next section where we're going to be talking about Stand By Me. And I'll have a timestamp so you can do that. So after they meet the judge's chambers and they hash out the deal, Richard Gere's character goes down to meet with Edward Norton, and he's talking to Aaron because the Aaron character has remanifested itself, and he's asking him how he goes. I've got a real bad headache, and he's talking whatever. And so he's telling him. He asked him, "Do you remember anything that happened?" He's like, "No, I don't remember anything." And so then he says, "Well, you're going to a facility, and they're going to help you, and you're not going to prison, and so forth." And Aaron was like, very, very thankful and appreciative or whatever. And as Martin is leaving, as Richard Gere character is leaving the cell, Aaron says to him, tell Laura or Miss Linney, tell her I hope her neck's okay. I hope I didn't hurt her too bad." And Richard Gere stops in his steps, turns around, and walks back to the cell. And he says, "What did you say?" He said, "I thought you didn't remember anything." Right? Because that was the whole thing. Uh, the psychiatrist says it's total amnesia. There's no memory. There's no cross. Aaron doesn't know what Roy does. Right? And what we learn is that there is no Aaron. It's just Roy. And he played Richard. He played his attorney. He played everybody. He outfoxed everyone, and he has some really, so, Richard Gere starts walking off, but the entire time, Roy is talking to him. And with everything that he says, it's just you can see by the reflection or the expression on Richard Gere's face, the character's face. Each thing is, it's just one more dagger into his heart, into his soul, because he really truly believed that this guy was innocent, that he was a good soul, and he really truly believed that he was defending a good soul because, and because he got personally connected. And that's one of the things that was brought up at the very beginning of the movie is, as a defense attorney, he doesn't care about a person's guilt or innocence. He's there to defend them. He doesn't want to know what the truth is. He just wants to defend his client to the best of his ability under the rules of the law, but he allowed himself to care about this guy. And so therefore it became very personal for him. And that is what made the dagger, go deeper and twist. So that's kind of my closing thoughts on the thing. What do you think, Neechie? What was your...
don't have closing thoughts. I have thoughts.
Okay.
And we don't have to go through all of them. Okay. But we're going to go through most of them. Okay. Because I think there's a lot that's really important. Okay. So, I think first off, at the beginning, Richard Gere's character is talking about the illusion of truth. I think that holds a lot of significance here. If you think about not just what he does as a defense attorney, but what Ed Norton's character, right, Roy Aaron, kind of does to him in creating that illusion of truth. I don't know what you think about that.
Yes, exactly. Because what is the truth?
Right.
And it's like Richard Gere said, the truth is what he says, the truth is what I make it to be, right? Or something to that effect, right? It's the illusion that he spins to the 12 men and women in the jury box, right?
Yeah, and kind of like what Aaron and Roy do to him, right? In creating this ruse, right? I think later on, I don't know if you noticed, but Ed Norton says to him at the end there, come dance with me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, that being one of the lines that Richard Gere says to Laura Linney to kind of like soothe her or seduce her and win her over. And Ed Norton says that. He's like, it's like we were dancing, right?
Yes.
Is that something that you like also picked up on and found to be like...
Actually, I didn't pick up on the dancing comment. And with you saying that, I'm like, yeah, okay, I see that now, but I had never picked up on that before. That's a great catch.
I don't know if they did that intentionally, but to me, it struck me, right? Because like when Richard Gere was doing that, I was creeped out, right? I was like, this is supposed to be like hot. Like, am I supposed to be like wooed over by this? And even her, right? And I'll go into this a little bit later because I'm going to move through my points fast, right? We don't have to linger on them, but I want to talk about her and his like little relationship in general that I thought was kind of odd. But yeah, like I found it creepy, right? And so when Ed Norton says it at the end, it made me feel that same way of like, oh shit, like he's been doing this to Veil this whole time in that same way. But yeah, should I move? Do you want to move on to the next?
Yeah.
Thing? There's a weird confession joke at the beginning that I think is really funny once you understand where everything is going. I can't remember what he says. Like, I haven't seen this many fucking people here since confession or whatever. that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
I like that she didn't ask for the case, and he mentions her doing that. Richard Gere asking or saying to Laura Linney, "Oh, you asked for this case, knowing I would take it." But in
Yeah.
reality, we see that she was assigned this, and it's just more like clever and subtle that way. Her being pretty accomplished as his little protege
Yeah.
there. That I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, yeah, and I think that also goes to the difference between the two, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't seek the big profile cases and stuff, right? She doesn't have to, because she doesn't look for the limelight. She doesn't look for the attention, and he does, right? He
Oh
desires it. He
yeah.
needs it, right? That's part of his, I don't know if his ego, right? He needs that. So
I think that's a great point. I made a note about like Frances McDormand in this movie, and then her chemistry with Ed Norton in those interrogation, but also like psychological evaluation scenes.
mhm,
It kind of immediately happens that there's something in Ed Norton's face. He's just an amazing actor, all in
yes,
all, right? And obviously, um, there's some parallels between this and Fight Club, which is interesting to me, and the characters that he plays. But anyway, but just them, their chemistry right off the bat in that scene, if you kind of look at Ed Norton's eyes, and realizing what's about to happen here, especially on a second watch, I bet that's even more prevalent. But yeah, them two together in those scenes was like a real highlight for me. Um, Trigger warning for anybody who fucking hates eating sounds in this movie. There is a scene where I think it's Shaughnessy, the old guy,
yep,
and
mhm.
Richard Gere are eating, and bro, oh my god, I almost wanted to like completely turn off the sound and just read it. It was that bad. If you do not like eating sounds, or if you like them, maybe you'll, I don't know, get off to that scene. But it is one of the worst eating sound scenes in a movie ever. I don't know, Peepaw, if you're triggered by that at all, or if you
No,
didn't care.
I didn't care, but what was kind of confusing to me, honestly, this is where my head went with that. Of course, Shaughnessy is played by John Mahoney. Some of you might know him if you ever watched like Frasier. He played Frasier's dad in that TV series. But anyway, they're in a Chinese restaurant, right? And they've got like I don't know what you call it, like it looked like egg rolls or something, but he's eating something that it's like extremely crunchy, right? And so when he bites into it, it's just like crunch, crunch, crunch. It's almost like you had a mouthful of chips or something, right? And just that crunchiness. I don't know what they had that was that crunchy, but whatever. So, but that's what it was. I was like, I was like, I've never had anything that was that crunchy at a Chinese restaurant. So, but
uh, I'm gonna try and speed through a lot of rest of these. There's the scene where after he's attacked by Roy, that I didn't really try to like really understand the point of there. It was like kind of like reestablishing why he does what he does, I guess. He says a line that I thought was interesting: reserve my lives for other than public life. There, so I didn't really understand what they were trying to communicate. I'll have to go back and rewatch it to really understand that scene. I don't know if you have an insight for me, a quick insight
yeah.
into that scene. He's like at the bar. It's like right after he gets attacked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where he's sitting there and he's drinking, and the reporter comes up, and he's had a little bit too much to drink, and he starts being a little bit too. He pulls back way too many layers of the onion, I think, and but he stops himself. He pulls up short. Yeah, and but yeah, so
Okay. Da, 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 da. I kind of really liked that him and Laura Linney don't ever actually have like a true physical encounter. I think that just kind of shows that that's not the point of
No.
this movie. I felt like that would have been meandering, and I like that they never went there. And I think it goes to her character. Like it really establishes her as a character better for her not to give in to this. Like she's been there already, right? She did that.
Yeah.
You know, she did it like the whole 6-month line that you mentioned at the beginning. Da, 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 da. Oh, and this part. This is something one of the last things I want to mention there. At all. Is the fact that he didn't warn, and they do address it, right? That he didn't warn her that Roy would attack her, Laura Linney, that Richard Gere didn't warn Laura Linney's character that Roy would attack her. As he went through when provoked, right? And at the end of it, like I had to kind of question, is Vale, Richard Gere's character, just as bad, or at least kind of in that realm as Roy for setting her up, knowing she could have died realistically. We don't know, right? This guy killed someone, right? And he attacked Vale. I don't know if you want to give final thought there on that.
I think he felt like she was probably safe. Because they were in a courtroom, there were people there. There was, there's police officers in the courtroom. I think he probably felt like she was probably safe. But he didn't just kill one person. Remember, he also at the end of the movie divulged that he killed the girlfriend too.
Yeah, that was odd too. A little,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, had he intended to kill Alex as well? I mean, because it's almost like he was kind of cleaning up the mess, as it were. So I don't know. There's a lot of things. I think that's that's one thing I like about movies, right? You can have half a dozen people sit down and watch a movie together, and those half a dozen people will have things that they will have in commonality that they see in the movie that they whatever, right? And then there will be little things that each person will extract and pull from it based upon their own, life experiences and so forth, right? Like, for example, you keying in on the dancing, right? Him constantly asking uh, Laura to dance with him. And at the end, Aaron talking to Martin saying, "Hey, I thought we were dancing here." Right.
Yeah.
So that metaphor of, because sometimes, people say life is a dance and you dance with people that you come in contact with, that you share your life is a dance, right? Life is a dance. And so, I think so kind of going on that kind of with that theme there, in the end, yes, Martin did dance with Aaron or Roy, but he didn't like him as a dance partner. And so the question then you have to ask yourself, and it's all said and done, going forward as a defense attorney, because the defense attorneys, I've been watching a lot of like shows, TV shows and stuff about attorneys and things here recently. And the one thing that these shows all hammer in, and from a defense attorney's standpoint, right? If you are a criminal defense attorney, you're going to be defending vile people, right? You're going to be defending rapists and murderers and, whatever. And you have to defend them. And you have to defend them from the standpoint that they're innocent. right? And sometimes that means they have to work out deals with them to where they serve less time, or sometimes that means they defend them and they get them off. And so you have people that do vile, wicked things to other people, and they go free because either the prosecutors don't have a strong case, they don't have the things that they need, and the defense attorney is good at spinning the truth and presenting a truth that the jury believes, and they let them walk free. Um, and you say, well, how could a person do that? How could a person be a criminal defense attorney? How could they defend a murderer or a rapist? Or, how could they do this? And what they'll tell you is they're not defending that person. They're defending you, right? You or me, because eventually, yes, there will be an innocent person that is going to be falsely accused of something, and they have to defend those people just as vigorously and as hard as they do, so that it protects the freedoms and the innocence of people that are falsely accused of things. Now, I don't know if everybody buys that or not, right? But it makes sense to me, right? Because you'd want an attorney that was going to look at every client as, and sometimes they know that the person that they're defending is a bad person. They're a drug dealer, or they're whatever it is that they're charged with. They know they're guilty of the crime, right? But they still have to give them a vigorous defense to the fullest of their ability, right? Now, how they lay their heads down at night and sleep with their conscience, I don't know. I couldn't do it. But, that's why there's different people for different careers and stuff, right? So, I don't know. It's wild, man. But this was a great movie, and I really, really, highly recommend it. So I guess 2 thumbs up from us.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to your selection. So let's talk about you. So introduce your movie. Let's kind of talk about it a little bit.
No, I honestly liked the way that you just did that and kind of giving the plot synopses, and then I can go in with my little notes. That worked out well.
So you want me to do all the talking? Okay.
You give a good plot synopsis, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this next movie is Stand By Me. It was recorded or was made in 1986. Was directed by Rob Reiner. Was written by Stephen King. Like I said, it stars Wil Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Jerry O'Connell, Kiefer Sutherland, just to name a few of them. John Cusack, which is one of my favorite 80s stars. Richard Dreyfuss. This is a movie that is set. I believe it's 1959. So this is in the late 50s, and to me, this is a quintessential snapshot or window into what 1950s, early 60s Americana looked like, right? The soundtrack for this movie is just off the hook. It shows a time period where things were a lot more innocent, I guess would be the way to put it. It's how I put it. It was a lot more innocent time. It launched the career of Wil Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey, Jerry O'Connell, Kiefer Sutherland, even John Cusack. It was just just a great little movie. The premise of this movie is you've got these four buddies. They're pals, and um, they learn of this boy who is missing and is presumed dead. They've got, the adults and stuff are out looking for it or whatever. And the character played by Jerry O'Connell, Vern, and it was really kind of cool watching this go back look at, because Vern is kind of like he's kind of like a little pudgy dude. He's kind of like a roly poly, you know what I'm saying? And being played by Jerry O'Connell. And if you look at Jerry O'Connell today, he's very slim. He's very cut. He's quite a handsome man. But to see him back then, kind of like a little roly poly, still had a lot of that what they call the baby fat. It's just kind of a cool thing to me to see. But anyway, he Vern overhears his older brother and one of his buddies and talking about they had stolen, hijacked a car and had went out on a joyride, and while they were doing this and stuff and messing around, they actually discovered and found the body of this missing boy. And the older boys were perplexed on what to do, because if they told law enforcement where the body was at, then they would get in trouble, they felt, because they boosted the car, because they want to know how they got out there and so forth and what have you. And but anyway, so these four buddies, decide they're going to go on a quest, and they're going to go find this young boy. And they believe that if they can find the body, they can then contact law enforcement and what have you, and they will get their names in the paper, and there'll be heroes and this and so forth and whatever. And the whole story is about this quest and what they learn, not only about themselves, but they learn about each other. And there are some things that are revealed and stuff that they didn't know. And it's like yeah, it's just a real heartwarming, like I said, this movie just is just a great movie. It's just a classic. And it's not your typical, because a lot of people, when they say Stephen King, they think about all the horror movies and stuff that he wrote, right? But this is not your typical Stephen King. This is kind of an adaptation, kind of his childhood, and a loose adaptation of his childhood. And so anyway, that's my opening thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love this movie for so many reasons. When I rewatched it, I think right off the bat, one of them is River Phoenix.
Mhm.
He is an emotional juggernaut in this movie. And it has nothing to do with him being a kid, really. In my eyes, it has a lot to do with how he becomes Chris Chambers. And just kind of injects this movie. There's a scene where he's talking to Gordy, and he says to him, like, I wish to hell I was your father, and
Yeah.
it has to do with really seeing Gordy for who he is, because Gordy doesn't have anyone in his life other than Chris who sees him. And throughout the movie, there's different moments with other characters where River Phoenix does a similar thing. But yeah, overall, there's so many reasons I love this movie. There is like a short story feel immediately because this movie is adapted from the book, and the way they do that, I think is amazing, and a lot of it has to do with like these immersive, nostalgic components. I'll get into like those a little bit more in a minute, but I think one of the other things I want to touch on is how the narrator is used. It adds like this context at key moments that like immerse you in the world more, right? Like I think about one of them where it stood out for me was he was giving some background on some of the older teens, like the kind of older brothers and like other older teens that we kind of cut to in this movie that are kind of like the antagonists in a way. And he gives like a little bit like of information about them that kind of just builds them more as characters. But yeah, I've touched on a bunch of things so far. Did you want to like? Is there anything you want to say about what I've just kind of thrown out there?
The one thing about the character Chris Chambers, like you said, played by River Phoenix, is in each of the other three guys, Vern, Teddy, or Gordy, right? He has a moment where with each one of them, where because they all have what's the word I'm looking for? Their weaknesses, right? Their insecurities, right? And he shores them up, right? He's that friend that is encouraging to them, right? That they're better than they see themselves, right? He does that for Gordy, played by Wil Wheaton, and Teddy with the issues with his father, right? Played by Corey Feldman, and Vern, played by Jerry O'Connell. But then there's a scene between Wil Wheaton and River Phoenix where Chris is having his own moment, right? And he talks about how the teacher, right? How he stole the milk money, but then he went and gave the money back. And rather than him being credited with it or whatever, they still punished him as doing it. And the teacher took the money and then spent it on herself, right? And how that broke his faith. Because, again, you got to remember this was in the 50s. And back then, adults, teachers were looked at with a reverence, right? This was a noble career. These were noble people.
Well, and Chris Chambers is kind of like all of those kids, aside from I think Vern and are kind of seen as bad kids, right? They come from these very like homes where they're being abused, right? I don't know. By the way, before we go talking much more, do you want to give a spoil? There's not really much to spoil about this movie.
I don't.
There's moments that are good to witness.
I don't think there's like any big spoiler per se. It's because it's a coming of age movie, right? It's these boys start off kind of as innocents, I guess, in a way, right? And at the end of it, because of them letting their guards down and being vulnerable to their buddies, and what they go through and stuff, they kind of, for the lack of a better word, they kind of lose some of their innocence, right? Especially when they do ultimately find the body of the boy that was killed. But the thing that is, like I was saying, with River Phoenix's character, he bolsters everybody, because like you were saying, Gordy, his older brother was like the superstar, right? He was a superstar football player, whatever. He was the only child that his mom and dad saw, and then he was killed in a car wreck. But you'll see in flashbacks in the movie and stuff how the older brother, played by John Cusack, was constantly trying to get his dad and his mom to see Gordy, who was played by Wil Wheaton.
Yeah.
because he's a writer, and he's like, "Hey, did you guys see the latest? The story was really good." He tries to get them to acknowledge his existence and acknowledge his talents, and they don't get it, right. And that's what River Phoenix's character continues to do for Will, to say, "Hey, look,
Yeah.
you're smart. You're going to do something. I'm a kid from the wrong side of the tracks. I'm always going to be that Chambers kid that that stole the milk money, and he lost all his innocence was lost when that teacher took that money for herself. That destroyed him because he did the right thing ultimately. He gave it, but he still was. And this was Gordy's chance. That he turns around and he tells him, says, "No, you can do whatever you want to do." And he starts encouraging him and saying, "No, you can. We will be in the same classes. You can go and be smart. You can do all these things. You just, you have to want it." And so there was that moment where they kind of shored each other up, and I think, because, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, I guess, or whatever.
Go ahead.
But at the very last thing that we see in the movie is the writer, right? Is what he's credited as. It's basically the grown up Gordy Lanch, Wil Wheaton, which is actually in the grown up version is played by Richard Dreyfuss, right? And in the end, at the very end of it, he's sitting at his computer and he's typing up this story, right? And he says, "I never had any friends later on,
Yeah,
like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone?" And that was such a poignant line. And when I watched this movie the other day, after you and I discussed, we selected our movies, and I watched this movie now, and we got to that end of the movie, and it got that whatever, and that line popped up. It really made me reminisce and think. And I look back at my childhood, when I was a kid, and I was 12 years old, and that age, and the what I did, whatever, right? And I was like, man, that is such a strong, because I have friends now, right? But I don't think they're as strong as they were back when I was 12 years old, because that's when you were still innocent and the world had not beat me down. And so you could be more trusting. You could be more open. And, and it's just because your buddies weren't, your buddies, like they did in this movie, they cheered you when you were having a weak moment. They cheered you up, and that doesn't always happen, when you get older, right? Because you learn you can't allow yourself to be weak. You can't allow yourself to be vulnerable. And so you kind of suffer in silence, and you just kind of have to deal with that on your own. And I think, to me, that's what that line was saying, right? You don't really ever have friends like you did when you were 12 years old, maybe that's just an old man's rambling. I don't know, but that's what when I reflected on that line, that's what, that's where my head went. That's where my mind went. And I thought, man, to go back and live in a kinder, gentler time, and to be innocent again, and to be, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny you say that. I very much growing up, that's kind of the time where I couldn't trust people, and I think that's why I loved this movie so much back then. Was because that's what I really wanted. And I was watching that scene, and I was sitting there thinking, like, this movie does friendship as a theme so perfectly, and really, I think, emphasizes a lot of what true friendship should be. And a good movie to show people, especially obviously kids, when they're looking for that example of it. And I was thinking about like how like a lot of my friends kind of like fit into and play the roles that these kids play for each other in this movie, right? There's like a scene where I think Vern is trying to like initially tell them about the body, right? Talk to them about the story of him being underneath the house looking for his pennies and hearing his older brothers talk, right? But they're not letting him speak, right? They're like, singing the "I ran all the way home."
Yeah.
So like over and over, teasing the hell out of him. And I totally thought about you in Toxic, and how like and a lot of us will go to tell a story, or when I'm with my friends, we got something important to say. And, like our friends, not ill-intentioned, right? They're just joking around, having fun, right? And that's what makes them the friends, but, just giving them absolute shit. But yeah, no, I think, yeah, the vulnerability part and the trust part is the choice, right? That we make, right? We have to let our friends into our lives in that extremely vulnerable way that we do as kids, because we don't know too much of like the capacity that we can be hurt by people, by our friends, right? Because our friends are what we have, right? Most often the people hurting us are our family, and that's what's going on for those boys, right? The three of them, Gordy, Teddy, and Chris, all come from homes where, Gordy, he's invisible. He's basically, basically flat out told that, he should have been the one who died, right? Yep. He has that breakdown about it with Chris when he sees the dead body. We can talk about that more after, but like, and, Teddy, having his ear burned, right? His dad, does some horrible things to his kids.
And not to be dismissive of what Teddy's dad did to him, but his dad, I'm sure was suffering from what they call back then shell shock, because he.
Oh, that could be a story all in and of itself. The complexities of that.
Yeah, because his dad was at Normandy. He was at the landing, the beaches of Normandy when they landed D-Day, and what those young men went through. And again, not to be dismissive, because you should never abuse your children. But even then, even though he knew his dad was wrong and mistreating him, he was still ready to fight anybody that spoke ill of his father. Because he so idolized and worshiped his father. And, so.
There's that whole scene, right, where the owner of that junkyard, wherever they're cutting through, says your dad is a loony, right? And it sets Teddy off to the extreme. And like that's something that like I get, right? Like my parents have lived some crazy lives, right? But I'm the only one that can ever talk shit about them. If anyone talks shit about my parents, I'll fucking kill you, right? No matter what I may have said or whatever, right? That's your family.
I can say it, you can't. That's the thing, right? So
don't care if my ears burnt.
Exactly. One of the things that when they're on this adventure and stuff, since you brought up the junkyard, we'll talk about that in a second. They were dreading the junkyard because of the chopper, right? Remember the chopper? And the chopper turns out to be just this old brown dog that's not, but the stories that they'd heard and everything was like, he was like this beast, this big, huge beast that was trained to go for their testicles. Right. And because they say chop, what was it? Sick nuts or something? Was that the line? I think it was sick nuts or whatever. And it turns out he's not this big vicious dog or anything. And I don't remember. I think this was where the narrator, the writer, quote, did the voiceover. Said this was their first introduction to basically the world lies to you, right? Because the chopper had been built up as this monster, and he wasn't. And that was their first exposure to how what the real world was, and kind of broke that that glass ceiling for him a little bit. And I thought, man, that's kind of something, really, because if the first thing is the exposure to, quote, the real world, that the little ceiling gets broke from, or whatever, is the fact that this dog is just basically a dog. He's not, he wasn't, because he runs up there, it chases him to the fence, whatever, then just kind of like lays down, rolls over, puts his belly up or whatever you want to say. That was it. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, he didn't really go after him or nothing. He wasn't like vicious, chomping, slobbering at the mouth or nothing. He was just like your normal dog, and it was just, I just thought that was hilarious. But anyway, yeah, that's, so anyway, what about the scene where, they crossed the swamp? You want to talk about the swamp scene?
Oh my God. We were finishing the movie earlier, and
Yeah.
Mikey was watching it with us, and he was like obsessed with that scene.
Of course he was. I remember when this movie came out, which, like I said, was it 86? I think it was. Yeah. 1986 is when this movie was released. So I was like, I'd have been like 17, I think, something like that. Yeah, probably about 16, 17. And I remember when I watched this movie or whatever, it was, and they cross the scene, of course, whatever. They first get into the swamp, whatever. They're splash around and dunk at each other and just goofing and whatever, like typical boy behavior, right? And then they get and they start freaking out because of the leeches, right? And I thought, man, that's so relatable, right? Because if you were walk through some water, whatever, in Neechie, and you come out on the other side, and you had leeches, whatever, on your legs, you'd freak out, right?
I feel like, oh shit.
Yeah, I think that's a relatable whatever, right? But when Gordy, Wil Wheaton's character, when he realizes that he's got a leech attached to his little bird, and he pulls it out and it's like covered in blood. I was like, damn, did it bite his damn willy off or what? Because here's the thing, right? As they're jerking all the other leeches and stuff off of their, arms and backs and legs and whatever else, there was no blood. You notice that?
Yeah.
And then he pulls the one out of his underwear, and his hand is really drenched in blood. Right? And so I'm like, damn, what is up with that? Because like, why would it be?
Is the skin more thin around that region? Maybe
I don't. The only thing I can think of, because if you tried to just, and here's the thing too, right? when leeches get attached to you, right, they have these little teeth.
Yeah, they hook in a little.
They hook in, right? So if we're looking at this like scientifically or realistically, when they were pulling all those leeches off everywhere else, there would be blood there too, right? Because you would literally be tearing a little bit of the skin if you didn't get them to release through, some other mechanism, like putting salt on them or sticking a match,
have them release
burning
themselves.
Yeah, making them release themselves, right? So if you're pulling them off, yes, there would be blood. So why wasn't the other? I don't know.
That was definitely a choice for effect there.
I think it was for effect. I think more than anything else, because again, I guarantee there was not a guy ever that's watched that movie and when they have that scene. If you're a guy, you grimace, you wince at that, right? And I think that was there just for more to sell it, right? To really say, "Oh man, this is bad." But it's of course he passes out, right? Yeah, blood loss, I guess, right? But anyway, I thought that was kind of wild, and but then of course they had the camp out scene shortly thereafter that where they're camping for the night, and that was kind of wild when they started hearing the coyotes, yipping and stuff, and they're cooking the hamburgers and Vern's hamburger ball or whatever you want to call it falls off, and he's like, and he winds up stabbing it and digging it back out of the fire or whatever. And he's happy now because he's going to get his little, his
little meat stick,
his little meatball or whatever it is, right? So
there was a couple of things that were really funny to me. I'll try to blow through them. The fact that no one thought to really bring food initially, I thought was really funny, and the fact that they're all a group of young boys and there's no girl there, and I instantly thought they had a girl, probably would have thought to bring food. You're going camping.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, but they're still at the age. I mean, you understand, 12 years. These boys were all around 12 years old or so, or maybe a little bit younger. Girls at that point,
they're hungry as shit at that age.
No, the girls still have cooties at that age.
Oh.
Now I'm serious, because most guys don't really start noticing or looking at girls till probably 13ish, maybe. All of a sudden, then they start trying to smell a little bit, putting on some cologne, maybe use a little deodorant, maybe. And that's the very few of them. That's the ones that's advanced. Still, most of them are still stinking. They just stank. They don't know the little stinky armpits, and boy, good Lord. So
the story he tells, right, in the camping scene, is a great story, but did it have to be about barf at the end?
Yes, it did. It 100% did. Because this is coming from the mind of a 12-year-old boy. And everything back, because they talk about this, right? Like one up in your buddies about trash talking their mom. That's the thing. Right?
Okay, that I understood, but the barf.
Yes, barfing is okay back then. Yeah, because they talk about I throw up, you lick it up. That is a thing for it may not be nowadays because society has kind of moved on. I don't know if 12-year-old boys still. I don't know. But yeah,
it had to be barf.
It had to be, yes, 100%, yes. For comical, it was purely comical reasons. Yeah.
The last two, more lighthearted notes I can blow through right away.
Yeah.
The dad, Gordy's dad, that I feel like the actor for whoever that actor is sucked. Every scene with the dad back then and now, I don't know if you noticed or cared, but watching this movie, I had to note, I don't know what's going on there, but he just really sucks. His line delivery sucks. And these are really emotionally impactful moments, right? He's coming in there to really kind of to cast Gordy aside, to really show that no one cares about Gordy. He only cared about Denny. But it kind of the way he does it is very robotic, like, why can't you be more like Denny? Like, it's not like I don't know if that's just like what they wrote. They didn't really write that because they were
I
focused on other
yeah.
things, right? Which obviously I love this movie enough where I don't really care about the dad's bad
Sure.
whatever, but it just yeah.
So I have a little bit different perspective on it. The actor's name was Marshall Bell.
Okay.
I have a little bit different perspective. S- as a father, I think because I'm not excused again, I'm not justifying anything, guys. I'm just when as a I've known fathers that have sons, right? Or daughters, either one, that are like superstar athletes, right? And they are themselves like big fans of like athletic events, whatever it is, baseball, football, softball, basketball, whatever, right? And that child becomes everything to you. It transcends just being your child,
Which I
right?
totally understand. It's just
And
the way that he
sure,
says it is
sure.
like robotic as shit.
I yes, and I think that was intentional.
Okay.
And I think the reason why it was intentional was because again, he was so invested in his son who gets killed in a car wreck. And so he shut everything he had is gone now. He's shut down. He's literally just going through the motions of life. He's probably gets up, goes to
Okay.
work,
Yeah.
he has nothing in his life. He has no joy, he has no happiness, he has no love, he has nothing because he has the same demeanor towards his wife, what little interactions we see, right? All he and even when there's the scene where the oldest son is still alive and they're all sitting there at the evening table, right? And Wil Wheaton's character, Gordy, is trying to get his dad to pass the potatoes, and his dad doesn't even acknowledge him, right? And he asks 2 or 3 times, and his
True.
and
Yeah.
the dad is talking to his son about how there's gonna be scouts there, this, that, whatever. The mom is like, she's like, "Well, are you gonna be seeing such and such? She's a really lovely girl." And the dad gets it, he doesn't have time for that. He has to be, so he's dismissive even to his wife because again, his whole world
Yeah.
is that son. And I think when the son is removed because of the death, he has no reason. He literally has zero reason to live anymore. And so when his robotic and shit, I think that is just because he is literally on autopilot. He's just robotic. There is no joy in his life anymore. Now, it just be he was a horrible actor? It's possible. But I will say for that role and stuff, I see and I understand exactly why it was done that way. Now,
You're
could it have been
saying there's some intentionality to it. It's not
I think so.
just bad
I think so.
writing or
No,
like
I don't
bad
because
performance.
everything else in this movie, Nietzsche, if you look at everything else, from even the most minuscule everything is so well written and so well directed, right? The performances are so why would they have just this one horrible performance, right?
I get you. And like going more into like that as like a theme.
Yeah.
The deer. Do
Yeah.
you think the deer is supposed to be Denny or not? Or what do you think is the significance of the deer?
I think the deer is again because this is the deer appears to Gordy um the morning before they find the body. And I think that I, I don't know if there's necessarily a symbolism there or whatever, what have you, but to me, I think it may be kind of because maybe innocence, the last of the innocence is leaving
Okay.
because after they find the body, you know and we'll get into what transpires there and everything, but going back, the boys were never they could not ever be the same after that.
Okay.
There's because let me ask you a question. Have you lost somebody and had to go to a funeral? Like to a funeral, and you go to the funeral home and they're laid out in a casket, whatever. How old was you with the first time you had to do that?
I believe it would have been my dad's mother when I was between 3 and 5 years old.
Okay, so that impacted you, right?
Yes, I would say, like, not as much as later on in different points,
Yeah,
but yes.
sure. Okay, so at 3 and
'Cause I
5,
was 3 to 5, like,
yeah. So yeah,
that's
it's kind of hard and the same thing. But when I remember when my dad's half brother, my uncle, passed away, I was like 12 or so, maybe 11, 10, somewhere in there. And I remember going, to the funeral and the funeral home and all that. And he was, laid out in the casket and stuff like that. And the one thing that kept going through my head was, and again, like, I remember I was like, whatever it was, 10, 12 years old, whatever it was I could not show emotion because men don't cry. Right. And so, these boys find this boy's body that has been hit by a train. And so it's mangled. That's a lot different from just seeing a loved one in a casket, whatever, right? I mean, so this is a traumatic thing that these boys are going through. And I think that them witnessing and finding that body in the shape that it was in, um, that really truly was the last of their innocence, because now that was the full force of what the world can do to you on display in front of them.
I think what's even not even more, but or another point to that is just the idea, the conception of going to see a dead body, right? If
Yeah,
you think about that as an idea, as an adult, right? We're not sitting up here being like, yeah, you know what I want to do this weekend? I want to hike across, our city or our little town, and go look at a dead body, right? But as a kid, not having that experience of of and I guess that kind of goes alongside with like Gordy being coinciding with, like his brother's death. And he from the very beginning kind of has that not aversion to the idea, but kind of not as stoked about it, right? As them. Just having that experience with death, and specifically like the impacts of death, yeah, like that. Once they've done that, they've gone there, right? They
yeah,
have that now. If it's not innocence but more what used to be this, like, oh, I want to rush to this experience. Okay, now I've had it. It's not
yeah,
as what it built up to be in
sure,
my mind, right? This is
yeah,
real now, right?
yeah. Because that's kind of what happens right here with this, right? I mean, they find the body, and before they had these delusions of grandeur of how they're going to be heroes and how they're going to be, in papers and the news and like all these things, right? And that's why Vern brings a comb, right? Because he wants to make sure the hair is right. And then when they get to that, and of course they have to confront the older boys, and they have to stand up because they shift from wanting fame and fortune to they wanted to give this boy some dignity, right? And so they stand up to these older boys to prevent them from doing that, right? To take this boy's dignity from him. And they wind up just doing an anonymous phone call, right? And tell the police where he's at, so they go, and so the parents will be able to finally have some peace of mind and what have you. But and and that's kind of but I think the ending of the movie, like I said, he's there and he's riding because his buddy Chris, right, Gordy's buddy Chris, he reads an article in the paper and he tells about how he was was he like in a diner or something, right? And he was and these two guys come in, they start having a fight, and he tries to be peacemaker because that's what he had done with all those guys, right? It was peacemakers, and he wound up losing his life trying to make peace between these two guys. And he finishes writing the last line about never having friends like you do when you're 12 years old. And he winds up going out, and his son and I think it was a buddy, and to take him swimming or whatever. And he gets out there and starts, cutting up with him a little bit in the yard or whatever. You can see him playing and cutting up, whatever, till they go get in the vehicle to drive off. Right. And I think that's so poignant because I think, a lot of times dads, they get that one little glimpse again, one more time, when their sons are growing up, whatever. They're acting goofy and they're doing the crazy things with their buddies, whatever, and they see that and they harken back, and they it's bittersweet, because they know that a time's coming when their sons too are going to have to grow up, and and that time passes, and so they try to help their kids hold on to it as long as they can. I think that's kind of was my takeaway with it, was that's why he went out and kind of cut up with them. And so, and I just thought it was such a great ending to this is just such a great movie. This, I think, is a movie you can sit down with your kids and watch, and yeah, it's just, it's a great movie.
It has great rewatchability.
Mhm.
Final things here, the music during when they finally do get to the body of Ray Bauer
Yeah.
is really, the perfect, it's perfectly scored, or whatever, I don't know, music terminology. It's great. It really immerses you in that moment as it's unfolding. The humor in this movie is very underrated. I think it's very subtle. In that, right, you think of other movies of the time in the 80s and with kids, and I think a lot of it can be a little bit on the louder side. But the humor in this movie is very witty, sarcastic, and it doesn't ever detract from like a lot of like the more serious things that are going on. It just kind of makes you laugh and immerses you in the world of being their age, which is great. And the last thing that I wanted to mention from just my list is when he says, only if you measure in terms of years, talking about where this was. This is at the very beginning of the movie when he's talking about how far back this is in his life. And he says, only if you measure in terms of years. But I think, that mindset is always accessible to us, right? Like we go through these moments, right, that really challenge that. I think, yes, we lose our innocence, but I don't think we ever lose access to seeing the world as we did, in terms of like emotion, trust, friendship. It just kind of takes like reflecting back on how you came to have that in the first place, like who your friends really were, what made them your friends, and like having someone like Chris Chambers in your life. I think I hope we all have a Chris Chambers in our life.
So I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of I'm gonna draw just a little bit of internet-y stuff into this, okay?
Okay.
So do you I think one of the things, I guess, to me was when you see the friendship between these characters, right? And I reflected about how the friendships that I had when I was that age, right? And the correlation that was there, right? Because when I was that age, going camping with my buddies, right? And, you know, um, talking about, barfing and farting and all the stuff that, boys do and stuff that they think is funny and comical and stuff, right? Um, um, do you think it's possible, right, to have that type of friendship? Because it seems like, and maybe this is just because a cynicism on my part, but is it possible to have that type of friendships in today, modern day, when so much of our time seems like is online, be it on social media of some kind, be it, TikTok or Twitter or Facebook or Discords or whatever it is, social media, and the people that we come in contact with and the interactions we have and stuff, right? Is it possible, do you think, to have that type or that level of friendship in this day and age online?
I think that if you treat the internet um, like it's supposed to be treated, right, which is a tool that you use to find connections, um, yeah, right? Like, and I've experienced that myself, right? Um, when right, you have, and I this is where I emphasize, right? It is a tool that you use to create connection. It is not the environment or the place with which the only place that you deepen that connection, right? You can play Minecraft, Fortnite with your friends and have a great time, right? But to have like these lifelong connections with people, you need to treat it like a tool, right? When Brick came out to see us, the adventures we had were very much, akin. Like we straight up did go into the forest 4x4 through Forest Service roads,
Yeah.
to find cool places to hang out and be. Brick gets all the credit for finding a lot of those places because the man loves Google Maps. But like even just getting to know people like that, right? Like those friend scenes. Like I thought about all of my online friends, times we had in person, right? When Seth came out here, me, her, Craig, and Toxic all went to the rivers, multiple times. And had, like I said, that we were talking to Mikey actually about them pushing each other around in the river. And I was like, oh my God, that is totally Seth, Craig,
Yeah.
and Toxic, because they were like pushing each other around in that river, and I was like, and I was fucking Gordy on the sidelines up there, like saying "fuck you fools," I'm going across this river, like I'm not about to get fucking drowned over here. So like it absolutely can, but if you misuse something, right, and only and you use it for only that purpose, and you're only sitting around in Discord servers, and you're never experiencing the world with your friends, then you're never gonna have a deeper connection, right? I think there's many people that may never meet due to fucking financial reasons, plane ticket costs, whatever, life circumstances, and I don't want to diminish those connections either. I think those are valid, but to the point where you're making what we're talking about in this movie, like, which is really exploring the world, with your friends. Maybe not, right? Maybe that's not possible. I don't know. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that's some insight. That's some things to consider. So anyway, until next time, guys. I don't have anything else. Neechie, do you have anything you want to kind of?
No, I somehow made it through all my notes.
Awesome. So until next time, guys, maybe go into your old DVD collection and dust one off and watch it that you haven't watched in a long time, or check out your whatever preferred streaming service and go find that movie that maybe you've never watched before, or is an old classic, and rewatch it. And but until next time, just remember, guys, we'll see you from the balcony.